My name is Clara Evans, and by the age of 35, I had built a thriving tech company that almost no one in my family knew about. As I drove back to my childhood home for Christmas dinner, the first one I'd attended in 7 years, my stomach twisted in knots. My father, Martin, had always favored my brothers, Daniel and Lucas, but nothing could have prepared me for what he announced that evening. When he declared that I was cut out of the inheritance, I only nodded and kept eating. None of them had the faintest idea what was about to happen. I grew up in Brookfield, a quiet town in Ohio where everyone knew each other. Our family house was a large colonial on Elm Street, the kind of home that made people assume wealth. And truthfully, we were fairly well off. My father, Martin, had built a manufacturing business from the ground up, and he never let anyone forget it. From my earliest memories, it was clear who mattered most in our household. My brothers were raised from birth to take over the company. Daniel, 3 years older, was the numbers guy, while Lucas, 2 years younger, had the charisma and charm, and me. I was the middle child who didn't fit my father's mold. Business is a man's world. Clara, he would tell me whenever I showed interest in the company, you should think about finding a good husband who'll take care of you. It was the early 2000s, not the 1950s, but my father was stuck in outdated gender roles. My mother, Elaine, would give me sympathetic glances, but never dared to contradict him. She had grown up believing women stood behind their husbands, not beside them. School became my escape. I thrived academically, especially in math and computer science. While my brothers went to football games and business dinners with my father, I spent late nights in the computer lab with my teacher, Mrs. Harris, who first introduced me to coding. You have a gift, Clara, she told me in senior year. Technology is the future and you can help build it. When college applications rolled around, I aimed high Stanford University. Its computer science program was among the best, and Silicon Valley was where innovation thrived. I poured myself into my application, and when the acceptance letter arrived, I was overjoyed. My father wasn't. Stanford. In California? That's absurd, he scoffed. The family business is here. Besides, do you even know how expensive that school is? Of course I knew. I had researched scholarships and financial aid, but the costs were still overwhelming. When I applied for a major scholarship and got rejected, I went to him for help. We were in his office, the smell of cigars heavy in the air. Behind his massive desk, he looked like a judge about to deliver a sentence. Your brothers need our money for their business degrees, he explained. That's where the family's investment belongs. Your computer hobby isn't worth it. It's not a hobby. Dad, it's my future, I insisted. Well, you'll need to figure out how to pay for it yourself, he said coldly, turning back to his paperwork. The discussion was over. So that's exactly what I did. I deferred my admission for a year and worked 3 jobs, waitressing in the mornings, retail in the afternoons, and bookkeeping at night. I saved every cent, took out loans, and finally made it to Stanford the next fall. Those college years were some of the toughest of my life. While many classmates enjoyed the full college experience, I spent every spare hour working side jobs just to survive. During finals week, I sometimes slept less than 4 hours a night. Still, I graduated with honors and, more importantly, with the skills and connections I needed to break into the tech industry. My first job was at a tiny startup in San Francisco. The salary wasn't much, but the experience was priceless. I worked side by side with the founders, soaking up everything about building a company from scratch. 2 years later, when that startup was acquired, I had both the knowledge and the savings to start considering my own venture back home in Brookfield. Meanwhile, Daniel and Lucas were climbing the ranks of our father's company as executives. Every call with my mother included updates about their new responsibilities and how proud my father was of them. I was genuinely happy for my brothers, But the contrast in how our career choices were valued couldn't have been clearer. The breaking point came a decade ago during a short visit home. I had just launched my first company, a healthcare technology platform that used artificial intelligence to improve patient care. We were still pre-revenue, running entirely on venture capital, and I was working around the clock. At dinner, my father asked about my little computer project, his tone dripping with condescension. Actually, we just closed our Series A funding round, I replied, trying to explain. Series A? What does that even mean? He interrupted. Real businesses make products and profits, not fancy presentations for investors, Daniel chuckled. Dad has a point, Clara. When are you going to get a real job? This is a real job, I countered. What we're building could change healthcare? Well, when you're done playing entrepreneur in California and ready to face reality, there might be an opening in accounting at the company, my father offered. As though he were doing me an enormous favor, I left the next morning without saying goodbye. For years after that, my contact with the family dwindled to the occasional phone call with my mother or a Christmas card. They knew I was still in California, still doing tech, but little else. I never shared my progress, and they never asked that now. As I pulled up to the old house in a rented Toyota, I took a deep breath. My real car, a custom-built Tesla, was sitting safely in my San Francisco garage. No reason to roll into town in something worth more than most of the homes in the neighborhood. I had deliberately dressed down, swapping designer clothes for a simple sweater and jeans. The only luxury I couldn't bear to leave behind was my watch a gift. I'd bought myself when my company hit its first 1,000,000 users. Even that I kept hidden under my sleeve, this Christmas dinner was supposed to be my chance to reconnect, to finally show them who I had become despite all the doubt and lack of support. What I didn't realize was just how explosive that revelation would be. The house looked exactly the same as it had every Christmas before. Colored lights traced the roof, a wreath hung on the front door, and through the windows, the glow of the tree spilled into the yard. For a moment, I felt like a teenager again, walking into the warmth of my mother's cooking after school. I hesitated before ringing the bell. 7 years is a long time to be estranged. Would they notice how much I'd changed? Would I fit in any better than before? My mother opened the door, her face lighting up as soon as she saw me. "Clara, you're here," she exclaimed, pulling me into a tight hug. The familiar scent of her perfume brought back a flood of memories. Come in, everyone's waiting." And they were. Inside, I was met with a sea of familiar faces. Daniel and Lucas stood near the fireplace, drinks in hand. Daniel's wife, Sophie, was arranging presents under the tree while their kids, Ryan 14 and Close 12, barely looked up from their phones. Lucas's wife, Hannah, was deep in conversation with my aunt, while their son, Ethan, 16, sat in the corner, glued to his device. My uncles were watching football in the background, and there, in his usual armchair like a king on his throne, sat my father. His hair was now fully gray, but his posture was still commanding, his eyes sharp as they landed on me. "Clara," he said with a curt nod. No hug, no smile. Just my name. "Hi, Dad. Merry Christmas," I replied evenly. Daniel was the first to approach, giving me a stiff side hug. "Welcome home, sis. California treating you all right?" "It is," I answered simply. "Still working on that app thing." Lucas chimed in, his smile not quite reaching his eyes. "Something like that," I replied vaguely. "Well, the company here is booming," Daniel said quickly. "We just expanded into 3 new states this past quarter. Dad put me in charge of Midwest operations," Lucas added proudly. "Revenue is up 37% since last year." The script was so familiar it almost made me laugh. My brothers laying out their accomplishments like trophies, fishing for our father's praise, cementing their positions. I smiled politely and offered congratulations. Finally, my father spoke up. "And what about you, Clara?" Did that startup of yours ever amount to anything? Before I could respond, my mother stepped in. Dinner's almost ready, Clara. Would you help me in the kitchen? Grateful for the excuse, I followed her. The kitchen was warm and filled with the scent of roast turkey, stuffing, and pies. Christmas dinner had always been her masterpiece. I'm so glad you came, she said softly, handing me a stack of plates. Your father would never admit it, but he's missed you. I doubted that, but nodded anyway. How are you, Mom? Really? She paused, considering. Oh, the usual. The boys bring the grandkids by often. Daniel and Lucas are here nearly every day for business meetings with your father. She lowered her voice. I wish you called more. Guilt tugged at me. I know I should have. Are you happy in California? Do you have someone special? She asked gently. Her concern was genuine, and it stung a little that I had kept her at such a distance. Unhappy. My work keeps me busy, and I love it. No serious relationship right now, but that's okay. She squeezed my arm. As long as you're happy, that's what matters. If only my father felt the same. Dinner was served in the formal dining room, reserved for holidays and milestones. The table gleamed with fine china, crystal, and silver passed down through generations. I was seated between my Aunt Margaret and young Chloe, directly across from my father at the head of the table. He led us in the traditional Christmas prayer, thanking God for family, prosperity, and another successful year in business. My return wasn't mentioned. Conversation flowed carefully around neutral topics, sports, school updates, town gossip, anything safe enough to keep the illusion of harmony intact. I focused on Chloe, who was eager to talk about her science class, and Ryan, who was considering colleges while playing basketball. Ethan, though, barely looked up from his phone until Lucas finally snapped at him. What are you so glued to? He asked. Research, Ethan muttered without elaborating. Put it away during dinner, Hannah ordered firmly. He complied reluctantly, sneaking glances at the screen every few minutes. So, Clara, Aunt Margaret leaned toward me. Your mom tells me you've started your own company. What exactly do you do? All eyes turned toward me, and I felt the familiar pressure to downplay my achievements. I founded a healthcare tech firm, I explained lightly. We build software that helps hospitals improve patient care. That sounds fascinating, she replied sincerely. Is it doing well? I felt my father's gaze sharpen. We're making progress, I said diplomatically. Daniel chuckled. Tech startups burn through investor money for years before they ever make a profit, if they make one at all. Manufacturing is still the backbone of America. The business just had its best quarter yet, my father added proudly. Glancing at my brothers, they've really taken it to the next level. And just like that, the spotlight shifted back to them. The same old pattern. I helped my mother and Sophie clear plates after the main course. Grateful for the brief escape, Sophie surprised me by asking quietly, what's it really like running your own company? Vincent never tells me much about his work. I hesitated, then chose honesty. It's the hardest thing I've ever done. Constant stress, sleepless nights, impossible decisions. But when you're building something meaningful, something that can truly help people, it's worth it. She nodded thoughtfully. Sounds more fulfilling than just inheriting someone else's success. Before I could respond, my mother called us back in for dessert. As we carried pies to the table, I noticed my father tapping his glass with a spoon. The signal that he had something important to say. I had no idea his announcement would flip the entire evening upside down. The room fell silent as my father rose from his chair, commanding attention like always. He wore his favorite dark green sweater, the one reserved for special occasions, and his expression was grave. Before we enjoy Elaine's wonderful desserts, I have an important announcement, he began, his voice carrying the same authority I'd grown up under. As you all know, Evans Manufacturing has been thriving these past years. Thanks to the outstanding work of Daniel and Lucas, my brothers straightened proudly, basking in the recognition. Sophie beamed. Hannah nodded with satisfaction. We've just completed the acquisition of our biggest competitor in the Midwest, my father continued. We are now the largest industrial equipment manufacturer across 5 states, with plans to expand further next year. A ripple of approval went around the table. Uncle Robert even lifted his glass in a silent toast. With this growth comes the need for clear succession planning. My father went on, I'm not getting any younger. He chuckled, and a few family members echoed politely. So, after much discussion with our attorney, I've made decisions about the future of the company and our family assets. I set down my fork, already bracing myself. Daniel will take over as CEO when I retire next year, he announced. His financial expertise and operational skills make him the natural leader for our company's future. Daniel nodded solemnly. Pretending humility, though the pride radiated from him, Lucas will serve as president, managing client relationships and business development areas where he has always excelled. Lucas lifted his glass in gratitude. The table erupted in congratulations. Aunt Margaret squeezed Daniel's hand, and Uncle Robert clapped Lucas on the back. My mother smiled too, though I caught the flicker of worry in her eyes as she glanced at me. My father cleared his throat, quieting the room again. His eyes locked on mine for the first time that night. As for the matter of inheritance, he said, his tone shifting, I've chosen to update my will to reflect the contributions made to the family business. Here it comes. I thought, Daniel and Lucas will inherit equal shares of the company and the majority of our family assets. He paused, then delivered the blow. Clara, you will not be receiving an inheritance, though I had expected it. Hearing it so bluntly in front of everyone still stung. The air went heavy with silence. Eyes darted between us, waiting for my reaction. You chose your own path away from this family and the business, he continued matter-of-factly. Daniel and Lucas have devoted their lives to what I built. They've earned their inheritance. I held his gaze steadily. Years ago, this would have shattered me. I would have cried, begged, or argued. But I was no longer that girl desperate for his approval. I understand, I said calmly, lifting my fork and taking a bite of apple pie. The flavors barely registered, but keeping my dignity intact mattered more. The tension was thick. My mother sat pale and rigid, clutching her napkin. Lucas shifted uncomfortably, unable to meet my eyes. Daniel, however, wore a smug little smile. Aunt Margaret broke the silence first. Martin, was this really necessary to announce at Christmas dinner? Her disapproving tone hinted she disagreed with the timing, if not the decision itself. Family business should be discussed with family present, my father replied firmly, settling back into his chair. Now, let's enjoy dessert. Conversations crept back, quieter and more stilted than before. I focused on my pie, pretending not to notice the pitying glances cast my way. Memories surfaced, the time he refused to help with my tuition, the countless dismissals of my work, the years of being measured against my brothers and found wanting. But under the old hurt was something new, peace. I no longer needed his money or his recognition. I had built something he could never control. Are you okay? Chloe whispered beside me, her young face filled with concern. I smiled at her. I'm perfectly fine, sweetheart. Sometimes grown-ups just have complicated relationships. She nodded knowingly. Grandpa can be kind of old-fashioned, out of the mouths of children. The conversation drifted toward holiday plans and resolutions, papering over the awkwardness. My mother's eyes kept searching mine from across the table, her silent distress clear. I gave her a small, reassuring smile. I was already thinking about the earliest polite time to leave when suddenly Ethan gasped loudly, snapping everyone's attention toward him. What he said next would turn the entire night upside down. Aunt Clara is on the Forbes Billionaire List. Ethan blurted out, his voice cracking with excitement as he stared wide-eyed at his phone. The room froze. But the silence was different, charged with disbelief. What are you talking about? Lucas frowned at his son. There must be another Clara Evans, Daniel said quickly, waving it off. Forbes just released their annual list. You probably mixed her up with someone else. Ethan shook his head vigorously. No, it's her. Look, her picture is right here. He turned his phone around so the nearest family members could see. My heart pounded. The list had gone live that morning. My PR team had warned me I couldn't keep it quiet once the acquisition went public. Let me see that, my father demanded. Stretching out his hand, Ethan passed him the phone. I watched as skepticism drained from my father's face, replaced by shock. His complexion went pale as he read. This says you're worth $3.2 billion, he whispered. That you founded Meditech AI, which was just acquired by a global tech giant. He looked up at me, his voice almost trembling. All eyes shifted to me. I took a steady breath. Yes, I said simply. That's correct, the room erupted. $3 billion. Someone gasped. You sold your company? Why didn't you tell us? Are you really a billionaire? I raised a hand slightly, and to my surprise, the room hushed. Apparently, money commanded more respect than anything else ever had. I founded Meditech AI 7 years ago, I explained evenly. We built an artificial intelligence platform to help doctors diagnose rare diseases and design personalized treatment plans. Last month, the company was acquired for a mix of cash and stock. Why didn't you share this with us? My mother asked softly, her voice heavy with confusion. I looked at her with affection. Because I wanted to be seen for who I am, not for what I've earned. When I left 7 years ago, it was clear my path wasn't valued in this family. I needed to prove to myself that I could succeed on my own terms. Daniel's face flushed red. So all this time, while we thought you were barely scraping by with some little startup, you were building a billion-dollar empire? It wasn't overnight, I clarified. The first few years were brutal. We almost went bankrupt twice. I lived in a tiny apartment and reinvested every dime. The breakthrough came when our algorithm correctly diagnosed a condition specialists had missed. After that, hospitals lined up to use our system. You could have told us, my father said, an edge of hurt in his voice. Would it have mattered, Dad? I asked evenly. You made it clear the only success you respected was tied to the family business. Nothing else counted. The truth hung in the air. Uncomfortably heavy. Hannah broke the silence with a practical question. So what does your company actually do in simple terms? I welcome the chance to redirect. Our AI analyzes medical records, research, and patient data to spot patterns doctors might miss. It helps with difficult diagnoses and suggests treatment options based on the latest global studies. We started with rare diseases, but expanded into cancer, cardiology, and neurology. Today, it's used in over 2,000 hospitals worldwide. That's actually incredible, Lucas admitted, looking almost sheepish. So that's why you were researching AI companies for school, Hannah said to Ethan. The pieces falling into place. He nodded eagerly. Yeah, I've been following Meditech AI for a project. I had no clue Aunt Clara was the founder until today. $3.2 billion, my father repeated, dazed. And I just announced you weren't getting an inheritance. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. Nervous chuckles slipped out around the table. I think I'll be fine without it, I said with a small smile. Daniel, ever the businessman, leaned forward. We should talk about potential collaborations between our industries. Manufacturing could benefit from AI. I'm sure Clara has better things to do than bail out the family business. Aunt Margaret cut in dryly, giving me a knowing glance. My mother's eyes shimmered with tears. I'm so proud of you, she whispered. I always knew you were special, did she? Or was this pride only possible now? I wasn't sure, but I still appreciated her words. Why'd you come in a rental if you're so wealthy? Ryan asked bluntly, in the way only a teenager can. I laughed. Because I didn't want money to be the first thing anyone noticed. I wanted to reconnect as just Clara. That worked, Lucas said wryly. Though with a touch of humor, the energy in the room had shifted completely. My father suddenly seemed smaller, less commanding in his throne-like chair. Daniel looked like he was recalculating my worth, while Lucas was, for once, genuinely curious about me. But what struck me most was the younger generation there, eyes full of admiration and questions. The night had taken a sharp turn, and for the first time in years, I felt like the center of the family's attention, not because I begged for it, but because I had finally earned it on my own terms. As the initial shock wore off, the room splintered into smaller conversations. Aunts and uncles leaned in, eager to hear about the early days of my company, how I'd secured funding, how we proved the technology worked. Even my cousins chimed in, firing off questions about artificial intelligence, like budding engineers. Through it all, my father stayed unusually quiet. He watched me with an expression I couldn't read, part regret, part calculation, part something softer. I knew before the night ended he would want a word alone. Daniel approached me as I was finishing a story about our first clinical trial. His tone had shifted. Clara, we really should talk about business opportunities. Our manufacturing processes could benefit from AI optimization. Perhaps another time, I said politely. I think Dad wants to speak with me. Of course, of course. He nodded quickly, his eagerness poorly concealed. But before you leave town, we should schedule time to strategize. I smiled noncommittally and slipped away. Sure enough, my father rose from his chair and walked toward his study, the same room that, as a child, had felt like forbidden territory. His eyes met mine briefly, and he tilted his head ever so slightly. An unspoken invitation. I followed him. The study looked almost unchanged. Walnut shelves lined with business books. Family photos, mostly of Daniel and Lucas, framed along the walls. His heavy mahogany desk dominated the room. He sat behind it, but the air felt different this time. Less intimidating. Close the door, he said. Not quite a command, not quite a request. I did so and sat down in one of the leather chairs opposite him, crossing my legs comfortably. You wanted to talk? He cleared his throat. I think we have things to discuss. I waited silently, refusing to make it easy for him. What you've accomplished. It's impressive, he admitted, the words sounding foreign on his tongue. Building a company like that, especially in technology, that's no small feat. Thank you, I said evenly. He shifted in his chair. About what I said earlier regarding the inheritance, Dad, I interrupted gently. I don't need your money. I didn't come here expecting anything from your will. That's not why I came back. Then why did you? He asked, genuine confusion in his voice. It was the real question, the one that mattered more than assets or titles. Because you're still my father, and this is still my family, I answered honestly. I hope time might have changed things, that maybe we could have a relationship built on mutual respect instead of me bending to your expectations. He looked down at his weathered hands. I've always respected you, Clara. Have you? I pressed. You dismissed my education, my ambitions, my career. You made it clear the only success worth respect was following in your footsteps. And because I was your daughter, that was never even an option. He flinched at my words. For once, he didn't argue. The business world is brutal, he said at last. 9 out of 10 startups fail. I wanted to protect you. By tearing me down? By telling me my dreams were worthless? I countered. Silence stretched between us. For the first time in my life, I could see him actually reflecting. I built my company with no help, he said finally, and you thought I had to prove myself the same way. I finished for him. And I did. But there's a difference between letting someone struggle and making them feel invisible. We sat with that truth. Heavy between us. At last, he said quietly, I'm proud of you. I should have said it sooner. Thank you, I replied. I could tell those words cost him effort, but this isn't just about money or success. If Meditech had sold for a few million instead of billions, would we still be sitting here? His silence was the answer. That's the problem, I said softly. Your approval has always been conditional. That's not what family should be. For the first time, he looked old, truly old. I don't know how to fix this, he admitted, his voice breaking the armor he always carried. Neither do I said honestly. But admitting it's broken is a start. I don't expect miracles, but I'd like to try for something better. What would that look like? He asked, genuine curiosity in his tone. It would start with you seeing me for who I am, not who you expected me to be. Showing interest in my work because it matters to me, not because of its dollar value. Acknowledging there are many ways to live a meaningful life. He nodded slowly. I can try. That's all I'm asking, I said. For the first time, I felt like we were speaking as equals. We sat in silence for a moment, the weight of years pressing between us. I'm sorry, Clara, my father said finally, the words stiff and awkward, but sincere. Sorry for not seeing your potential, for making you feel lesser than your brothers. You deserve better. It wasn't perfect, too late, too little, but it was real. And for me, that was enough to crack open a door that had long been shut. Thank you, Dad, I said quietly, rising to leave the study. Back in the living room, the atmosphere had softened. Small groups had formed, conversations warmer and freer than before. My mother approached almost instantly, concern etched across her face. Are you all right? What did your father say? She whispered. We had a good talk, I assured her. Probably the most honest one we've ever had. Relief flickered in her eyes, quickly replaced by guilt. Clara, can we talk privately? We slipped into the kitchen, now empty except for the lingering smell of cinnamon and turkey. My mother leaned against the counter, wringing her hands in her apron. I owe you an apology, she said softly. I should have stood up for you more. When your father dismissed your dreams, when he refused to help with Stanford, when he lavished all his pride on the boys, I should have said something. Mom, you did what you could, I began, but she shook her head firmly. No, I stayed silent because I thought supporting my husband meant never contradicting him. But that silence hurt you, and for that, I'm deeply sorry. Her candor startled me. My mother had always been the peacekeeper, smoothing rough edges, never confronting conflict head-on. I always admired you, she went on, her eyes bright with emotion. Your determination, your brilliance. When you left for California, I was terrified, but also proud. I just never said it loud enough to drown out your father's disapproval. I took her hand gently. I hear you now, Mom, and I appreciate it more than you know. Tears slipped down her cheeks as she admitted. All these years, I've kept a folder of articles about you. Every time your name appeared online, I printed it. Your father never knew. That revelation hit me deeply. Though she hadn't defended me openly, she had quietly celebrated me all along. I'd love to see that folder sometime, I said, hugging her tightly. When we returned to the living room, Lucas caught my eye. He looked strangely hesitant. Got a minute? He asked, gesturing toward the porch. The cold December air was refreshing after the heat of emotion inside. He leaned against the railing, staring out at the backyard where we had once played tag as kids. I owe you an apology, he said bluntly. I've been a lousy brother. I followed Dad's lead in brushing you off, and honestly, I enjoyed the favoritism. I never stopped to think how unfair it was to you, but I always admired your guts forging, your own path, moving across the country, building something from scratch. That takes courage. His sincerity surprised me, and for the first time in years, I felt a warm flicker of connection. "Thank you," I said softly. "That means a lot." "For what it's worth," he added, "I think what you built matters more than money. Our machines sit in factories. Your technology saves lives." We stood in comfortable silence, breath forming white clouds in the chilly air. "How's Ethan doing?" I asked after a moment. "He seems pretty hooked on tech," Lucas smiled. "He's brilliant with computers. Wants to major in computer science, but I don't really know how to guide him. Maybe you could." "I'd love to," I offered. "I can connect him with mentors, even set up an internship if he's serious." "That would mean a lot," Lucas said with gratitude. Back inside, I spotted Chloe curled up by the window, tapping away at a tablet. I sat beside her. "What are you working on?" She looked up shyly. "Just a coding tutorial." "I'm learning Python." My heart leapt. "Really? That's amazing. What got you into coding?" "We had a tech week at school, and I loved it. Mom bought me this course for Christmas, but sometimes it's confusing. I can help," I said warmly. "And I can introduce you to women engineers at my company who'd love to mentor you." Her eyes went wide. "Really? You do that?" "Of course. In fact, we run a summer program for students interested in tech. You'll be eligible soon." Her face lit up, reminding me of myself at her age, just discovering that technology could open endless doors. As the evening unfolded, I found myself in conversations I never thought I'd have with my family. Daniel, who earlier had tried to angle for business deals, approached again, this time with a different tone. "You know, Clara, I always thought you were just being stubborn, refusing to join the family business. I never considered that maybe you were building something better." "Not better," I corrected gently, "just different. A path that fit me." Even Aunt Margaret pulled me aside. "Your grandmother would be so proud of you," she whispered. "She once dreamed of starting her own business back in the 1950s, but your grandfather wouldn't hear of it. Said it wasn't a woman's place. She poured all that ambition into community projects instead. But I always wondered what she could have done if she'd had today's opportunities." Her words struck me deeply, reminding me that the limitations I fought against weren't just mine. But generational Dot, meanwhile, Ethan couldn't contain himself. He came rushing over, his phone in hand. "Aunt Clara, I've got so many questions about AI and machine learning. Do you think sometime I could visit your company?" His enthusiasm was infectious. I smiled. "I'd love that. In fact, why not come out to California this summer? You could shadow our teams and see firsthand how a tech company runs." His jaw dropped. "Seriously? That would be insane." "Consider it arranged," I promised, already making a mental note to discuss it with Lucas and Hannah. Energy in the room was unlike anything I'd ever felt at a family gathering. For once, instead of skepticism or dismissal, I was being asked about my world, about the future I had built, about technology, about ideas. And as I looked at my nieces and nephew, their eyes alight with curiosity, I felt something I hadn't expected. Hope. Hope that maybe the cycle of narrow expectations could finally end with them. The evening might have gone on with more questions and laughter, but around 9 o'clock, my phone buzzed. It was Maya, my Kuan closest friend. "Clara, I'm sorry to disturb your family time, but we've got a situation," she said quickly. The integration team at the tech giant pushed untested changes into the core algorithm. 3 hospitals are already reporting issues. My focus sharpened instantly. "Any patient impact?" "Not yet. But if we don't roll it back, there could be. Their CTO is resisting. We need your call on this." "I'll be on a video call in 20 minutes, I promised, then hung up. I found my mother and explained. "I have to leave a bit early, work emergency." She nodded knowingly. "Of course, dear." Will we see you before you head back to California? Yes, I assured her. Let's have breakfast tomorrow. When it came time for goodbyes, they felt completely different from when I'd arrived. My nieces and nephew hugged me tightly. My mother held me like she didn't want to let go. Even Daniel shook my hand with genuine respect. And Lucas gave me a clumsy but heartfelt hug. And then my father, who had always kept me at arm's length, pulled me briefly into his arms. We'll talk more, he murmured. There's a lot to catch up on. I'd like that, I replied cautiously, but with hope as I drove away in the rental car, the streets of Brookfield glowing with Christmas lights. I thought about how much had shifted in just a few hours. The revelation of my success had forced a reckoning that was long overdue. I also knew money alone couldn't heal decades of neglect and dismissal. Real change would require something rarer: honesty, consistency, forgiveness. And for the first time in years, I actually believed it might be possible. 1 year later, I found myself driving back to my childhood home once again for Christmas dinner. This time, though, everything felt different. Last year, I'd rented a modest Toyota to avoid standing out. This year, I pulled into the driveway in my own car, a sleek Tesla I no longer felt the need to hide. The anxiety that had weighed me down before was gone, replaced with cautious optimism. Over the past 12 months, my family and I had slowly rebuilt our relationships. It wasn't perfect, it never could be, but it was real. My father surprised me most. Just 2 weeks after that unforgettable Christmas, he called to tell me he had started seeing a therapist. I want to understand why I treated you the way I did, he had admitted. And more importantly, I want to change. And change he did. He began asking thoughtful questions about my work during our calls. He read articles about women in tech and sent them my way. He even flew to California twice to see my office and meet my team. The family business had evolved too. Daniel and Lucas officially took over as planned, but they steered it into new territory. They launched an internship program to bring more women into manufacturing leadership. They modernized their processes with technology. And in a move I never expected, they appointed my mother to the board of directors. Finally recognizing her decades of insight. As I parked, I noticed more cars than usual lined up outside. This year, I wasn't the last one to arrive. My mother opened the door with her usual warm hug. Merry Christmas, sweetheart. Everyone's already inside, and we've got some special guests. The living room buzzed with conversation. Alongside the familiar faces were new ones. Maya, my Q, chatting with Lucas about AI applications. 2 of my engineers showing Chloe a project on a laptop. Ethan deep in discussion with our lead data scientist, his summer mentor. The blending of my professional world and my family's world would have been unthinkable a year ago. Yet here it was natural, seamless, and strangely wonderful. Then I saw him. My father approached with a relaxed smile I barely recognized. Merry Christmas, Clara, he said warmly, pulling me into a genuine hug. We've got some exciting news to share at dinner. The dining table had been extended to fit everyone. But the biggest difference was symbolic. My father wasn't seated at the head. Instead, he and my mother sat side by side in the middle, a quiet acknowledgement that the power dynamic of our family had shifted. Conversation flowed easily about work, technology, family milestones. The rigid walls around acceptable topics had finally fallen away. After the main course, my father stood. Just like last year, he had an announcement, but this time, his voice carried not dominance, but pride. I want to share some important news about Evans Manufacturing, my father began. His voice steady, but different, less commanding, more collaborative. As you know, Daniel and Lucas have been leading the company this past year, and they've done an outstanding job. My brothers nodded appreciatively. But my father wasn't finished. They've also helped me realize that my vision for the company was too narrow. So today I'm proud to announce the creation of the Evans Innovation Fund dedicated to supporting women, entrepreneurs in technology and manufacturing. The room buzzed with surprise. This fund will be overseen by a board including your mother, myself, and Clara, he continued, glancing at me with genuine respect. And eventually, it will include other women in our family, starting with Chloe. When she turns 18, Chloe's eyes widened in amazement. We will allocate 5% of the company's annual profits to support women who, like Clara, have the vision and determination to build something meaningful. For a moment, I was speechless. This wasn't just a token gesture, it was a fundamental change in mindset. And there's more, he added. We've also established the Harris Scholarship, named after Clara's high school teacher who encouraged her to pursue computer science. Every year, it will fund full college tuition for 5 young women pursuing degrees in STEM or business. My mother's eyes shone with pride, not just for the announcement, but for the role she had clearly played in shaping it. She had found her voice over the past year, and our entire family was better because of it. The applause that followed wasn't polite, it was heartfelt. For the first time, our family legacy was expanding beyond factories and machines into something bigger: opportunity, inclusion, and innovation. After dinner, I found a quiet moment with my father outside. The night sky was clear, stars scattered across the cold air. The Innovation Fund is incredible, I told him. Thank you for doing it. It was the right thing to do, he replied simply. I spent too many years limiting possibilities instead of creating them. I can't change the past, but I can help shape a better future. That's all any of us can do. He looked out at the stars, then added quietly, I used to think legacy was about protecting what I built, preserving it exactly as I made it. But I've learned true legacy is passing down values so the next generation can build something even greater. Something I never imagined. For the first time in my life, I believed him. Inside, the house was alive with energy. Chloe proudly showed me the coding project she had been working on. Look, she said excitedly, scrolling through lines of Python she had written herself. That's fantastic, I told her. Your logic is solid. Keep at it, and you'll be building apps in no time. Ethan was talking to my lead data scientist about college applications, rattling off names of top computer science programs. His enthusiasm reminded me of my own early days, hungry to learn, eager to explore. Meanwhile, Daniel and Lucas were in a lively debate about how artificial intelligence might transform manufacturing. For once, instead of dismissing my work, they were looking to me for insight. My mother drifted over, smiling as she watched the room. This, she whispered, is what I always wanted. All of us together, really together, not just under the same roof. And she was right. For the first time in decades, it felt like our family wasn't divided into camps of winners and outsiders. There was curiosity, respect, and finally understanding. Later, as the night wound down, Ethan tugged on my sleeve. Aunt Clara, do you really think I could intern at your company someday? Absolutely, I said without hesitation. Come out this summer. You'll get to shadow our engineers and see how the magic happens. His face lit up. Best Christmas ever, as I looked around the room at Chloe's eager smile, at Ethan's shining eyes, at my brother's grudging respect, and at my father sitting beside my mother instead of above her. I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Peace, success, and wealth may have cracked the door open, but it was honesty, forgiveness, and effort that allowed us to walk through it together. For the first time, I realized that my true worth was never measured by my father's approval, nor by the dollar figure on Forbes' list. It came from staying true to myself, building something meaningful, and choosing connection over resentment. As the family gathered for a photo around the glowing Christmas tree, I understood something simple but profound. The greatest wealth isn't what you accumulate. It's what you build together with the people you love.